morning. Welcome to the training webinar for this week. I'm Dale Franks, and this one is going to be one of the unusual ones because it is not going to be demonstration performance. Unfortunately, it's largely going to be lecture as I talk about the application development process for Process Director. I have a series of documents that we'll be taking a look at as part of this webinar. Those documents are all available. If you want a copy of them, I'm happy to send them to you. All of these documents are similar to, not exact, but similar to ones that we use here at BP Logix whenever we are developing applications for customers. It's part of our application development process, which I'll be talking about today. As always, if you have any questions at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. Click that button, type in the question. I'll see it, and I'll be able to respond to your questions live. So with that said, let's get into it. And assuming I have set this up properly, I'm going to assume that we're all seeing my my PowerPoint screen, hopefully, as we talk about the application development process today. Process Director is a low-code, no-code platform, which means, in general, it doesn't require coding skills. Yeah, there are a couple of things where if you really want to do something complex, you are going to have to apply some sort of form script, perhaps, or timeline script, or even knowledge view script to do a couple of things. Sometimes even simple things, right? If you wanted to color the background of certain knowledge view rows, you would need to have a little script that would go through the columns, find the values that are relevant to the row that you want colored, and then you would have to apply the color to each of the columns in that row. That would require a little script. So sometimes it's not super complex things that require scripts, but for the most part it is. And certainly in terms of how the form or the process timeline are going to work, you don't really need to know C# or any other programming code or JavaScript to make your forms work. They generally work right out of the box. That's the point of a low code, no code application. So from a technical standpoint, if you're not a developer, if you're not a programmer, no problem. You can still create applications, quite complex applications, and not have to know a bit of code. Now, that doesn't mean that Process Director is an easy product to learn. It is a platform. Platforms are complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and there is a heavy training requirement to make Process Director work. That's true of any software application. It's especially true of a platform because a platform that can do anything without writing code still requires training on how that platform works. That's just an irreducible part of using Process Director. But in terms of the technical requirements, you don't need to be a programmer. Anyone who is relatively computer literate can learn Process Director and can create complex applications without being a coder. However, having said that, while the technical parts of learning Process Director and figuring out how a form works and timelines and knowledge views, it does have its own complexities. But that is really a small part of the actual application development process. Yes, there's a lot to learn as far as how Process Director works, but it's technically pretty straightforward in most cases. Less straightforward is how you actually develop apps for your end users or other customers in your organization, because that requires a process as well that has to be learned. And that's the point of today's webinar. The process that you use for developing apps is the most important part of the application creation process. We often think, and I was a Visual Studio .NET, C# Windows desktop developer for 15 years before I started working for Process Director, and for 10 years prior to that, well, .NET didn't exist, so I used other platforms as a programmer. So I understand, especially since a lot of times organizations will buy Process Director and immediately shove it over to their IT department to say, you guys handle this, rather than training business users in how to create applications. And I understand from a pure developer's point of view how you would think that developing the application itself is the important bit, and that's the bit that takes a lot of time. But in point of fact, it's all of the things that you have to do before and after you do the actual development of the application that are the most important bits of application development. There is a roadmap for how you should develop an application for customers inside your organization, and that is the roadmap that we're going to be discussing today. We're not going to use a lot of programmer jargon. I'm going to start with the assumption that the audience for this are not software developers, because I think if you are a software developer, you've probably had some training in an overall development process that includes gathering specifications and what have you. But if you're not, that's a process that you probably don't know much about. And so we're going to attack it from that angle, as a non-developer learning how to develop applications in Process Director. So we're going to concentrate on the fundamentals of the process around developing an application, not the actual development of the application itself. So the first question that you need to understand whenever you receive a request for developing an application, any application, is an understanding of who your customers are. Because every application that you create really has two sets of customers. The first set of customers are the people who actually ask you to build something. My understanding is, in most organizations, that, and it's true for us at BP Logix as well, if you were to ask us to build an application for you, as customers sometimes do, we really have two sets of customers, and you will too. First, there are the people who are asking you to build the application. So you're the process director, developer, person, and other organizations, sub-organizations in your enterprise will come to you and say, hey, we need an application that does X. All right, well, the person who asks you for that application is obviously a customer. They're asking you to build something. It's your responsibility to build the thing they want. But there's another set of customers that often get left out of this conversation, and those are the people who are actually going to use the application. Sure, you have to satisfy the people who asked you to build the application, but the people who use the application, or who choose not to use it, as the case may be, if they don't like it, both have to be satisfied. So your goal is to meet the objectives both of the people who are asking you to build the application, customer number one, and customer number two, all of the universe of end users who are going to have to use that application and who really do need to, if not enjoy it, at least not actively dislike it. So you need to make both of those people happy, which requires sometimes that you discuss with your first customer, the people who have commissioned the application. You may have to have discussions about why some features or some methods of operation that they want to implement might be irritating to the people who are using the app. Because an application that end users don't like is not an application that people are going to want to adopt, at least not willingly. So both of those customers have to be satisfied. There are 4 stages of developing an application in the process that we propose and that we use here. And these are pretty much generally the 4 stages that I think we could place on almost any sort of development initiative that anyone would have for any application. First, of course, is the design. What is the application going to do? What are its objectives? How is it supposed to work? What are the requirements for the application? What is the end state that the users will experience once they have gone through the process of using the application? What information needs to be recovered from the application? What reporting needs to be done? All of these design issues need to be discussed and finalized at the very start of the process. And indeed, this design stage may take much longer than actually building the application itself. But the development of the application is the second stage. That's when you're actively working on the application and building it. Then you go into a testing phase. You've finished the application, or at least you think you have, and now you need to test it with some group of users who will probably find things that you did incorrectly, or things that they don't like, or things that you thought were cool that simply don't work as well as you thought they did. So testing is always great for that. And then once you have testing, you've fixed the major issues that your test community has found, you can then release the app into the wild and throw it onto a production server, and people can start using it. That, by the way, is generally not the end stage. It's rare to have an application that you release and then that just stays static for years on end. This is an iterative process. At some point, there'll probably be requests for change, and you're going to want to have to go back. And when you do, you're going to need to repeat all 4 of these steps. So what we're going to do is discuss each one of these steps in detail, and I'm going to provide you some examples of how things work, and we'll just cover that as we go. Before we do that, we do need to talk about the development environment and the dev stage and production life cycle. Ideally, you would have 3 different servers. You would have a development, a staging, and a production server. You don't necessarily need all 3. You can live with just a development and a production server, or as some of you call it, and some of you have, a staging and production server. 2 is kind of required. 3 is suggested. And there's a reason why that we have the 3 servers. The development server is a relatively open server. Doesn't have very many permissions on it. It really only exists to do development on. The only people who really touch it are your developers. There's some downsides to development servers. For example, if you're going to throw some wait tasks into a process, it's going to take a while for those. You're going to have to probably manually prompt those wait tasks because of the way timers work in Process Director. Timers work based on prompts from user activity. There's generally very little user activity on the development server. There's probably 3, 4, maybe 5 people who actually use it to build stuff. And it's pretty open, and it doesn't necessarily replicate fully what you have in your production environment. There are some things that should be replicated. For example, and okay, this is where we are going to have to try to work with 2 screens here and a PowerPoint presentation to make this work. I think this works if I do this and I bring this over. Yeah, sure, that works. Some things do need to be replicated on all 3 servers: production, staging, and development. Generally, it is those items that you would find in your system folders, right? So your business rules, your those that are global anyway, your business values, your data sources, custom tasks, all of these things that are in these folders with the square brackets in the name, they all need to be the same on all of your servers. It's best, if you can, on the development server, replicate your list of users. So, export your list of users from your production server and bring them into your development server. And the folder structure should, in general, kind of mirror what's on your production system and your staging system as well. Now, your staging system should almost perfectly replicate what you have in production. It does need to look very, very, very much like your production system. And technically, the reason why this is the way that import and exports work in Process Director. You want to have the same sort of folder structure in all of your servers, because whenever you import an object from one Process Director server to another, we don't actually know what the unique IDs for each of those objects are. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, objects in Process Director have unique IDs called GUIDs, and those GUIDs are generated automatically on the server. And GUIDs are a unique number, not just unique on server 1 or server 2, but unique in the world. So therefore, I can't take a GUID and transfer it from one server to another. So what we have to do in the import process is look at the name of the object and its folder path, and then make comparisons when you import. So maybe I should have kept this on the screen a little bit longer. So let's say that you have a reference to a custom task somewhere in your application. Your form is running a custom task. This is the most common use, but also business values as well. Whenever we do the import, because the GUIDs get stripped out of every object. So there is a specific GUID for the Active Directory folder. And if you open the Active Directory folder, there's a specific GUID for each one of these custom tasks. However, I don't know what the GUID is on the development system and the production system both when I export. When I export, all GUIDs get stripped out. So, as I said, the import process looks for names of objects and folder paths. So if I use the fill fields from Active Directory custom task, all right, that's its name. And assuming that the custom task has the same name and is in the custom tasks folder, which is at the root of your partition, then the folder is default partition / custom tasks / Active Directory / active fill fields from Active Directory. And when I import my form, where I'm wanting to grab some fields from Active Directory, and I import that form, the reference to the custom task is only going to be findable by its name and folder path. So Process Director is going to look in the system into which it was imported, and it's going to think to itself, well, when I was exported, this custom task resided in this location with this name. Does it reside in this location with this name on this server onto which I'm imported? If so, then the linkage just happens automatically. So it's very important that on all three of the servers, your folder paths, certainly for any of the global objects, all need to be the same on all three servers. So that does need to be replicated. Now, that doesn't mean that the actual content needs to be exactly the same, but the same object has to exist. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at data sources, because this is one of the most common ones. And, I'm trying to look over here. My microphone is over here. So if I'm not as clear as I should be, again, just Q&A me and let me know. But let's go into data sources. So I've got several different data sources. Most of these are just notional. They don't really exist. But let's say that I have do I have a SQL data source? Yes, I do have a SQL data source here. I don't think it's a real one. For some reason, it doesn't want to open. There it goes. It finally opens. Okay, yeah, it says SQL data source. It's not really a SQL data source, but let's go with SQL here. I'm looking for SQL Server. There it is. Boy, it's hard having that screen 4 feet away from me and trying to read it. So I would have a SQL data source, and it's called SQL data source. And this SQL data source should exist on both my production and staging slash development server, or all three, not both. Three is not both. That doesn't mean that this data source, though it must exist on all three servers, must also look at the same data. So on my development and staging server, the data that I see might all be mock data. It might be training data because I don't know the connection string to the database. It doesn't have to be the same. I mean, obviously, if I'm querying tables or something like that using SQL, then clearly I need to have the same table and field names in both databases. But in one of those databases, it just might be a training database that just has a bunch of mock data in it. The structure is the same. It looks the same. I would query it the same. Everything would look exactly the same. The number of records obviously might be different. But on my development staging system, I might be using a training database using this data source name, SQL data source. Whereas on my production server, this data source would be pointing to live data and potentially many more records, all of it real. And I don't want to expose that data on the dev or training side because I don't want it unnecessarily accessed. It might contain PII or FERPA or HIPAA data of some sort. And I've got to be very careful about how that gets exposed. So with that in mind, I'm looking at two different databases. However, when I do the import, the only thing that the import process is going to care about is A, does this data sources folder exist? And if it does exist, is there a data source in there called SQL data source? If so, my linkage will work automatically when I import from development to staging and from staging to production. The data I'm going to see when I run the forms and perform the queries obviously is going to be different, but the objects exist. They have the same name and they're in the same folder location. So that's a very important consideration for the servers that you run, whether you're running all three, dev, stage, and production, or whether you are just running production and staging. You can live with just a production and staging server. I mean, technically, if you only have a production server, you could create a partition, a staging partition on that server or a development partition on that server. And I guess you could kind of use it like that. That gets super tricky. Wouldn't recommend it, but it's possible to use it that way. But generally, it's best if you have a development and production server. So generally, whenever we do, whenever we have a cloud customer or whatever, we provide them with at least a development and a staging server. And the staging server then becomes a combined development slash staging server. Both of the things happen at the same time. And on the staging server, we generally want to replicate the environment that's on the development server so that they look the same, they have the same users, and that on the staging side, that just makes our testing a lot easier. So assuming that you have the correct environment and you've gotten a request to create a new application, you then move to the design stage of the application development process. And the first step in the design stage is to create the specifications. And you'll generally get some sort of specifications from the customers in writing. They'll send you a list of requirements in some sort of requirements email or documentation or something of that sort, and you will need to use that to create your own application requirements document. Now, a lot of times what you're going to get is pretty simple, right? So let's take a look at the training project that we often use for a student wanting to change their major. And what you might get from your customer is something like this. You're going to ask them, how do you want this process to work? And your customer will generally, trying to use the path of least resistance, give you as little information as possible so that they don't have to write a long requirements document. That's perfectly understandable. They have the normal job that they do. They're just trying to tell you, like, this is how we want the application to work, and they want you to handle that. And to some extent you can, but often you can't whenever you get a document like this, because I see these 6 little bullets and I have questions. And the reason I have questions is because my customers have mental issues. And by that, I don't mean to say that in a derogatory sense or to say that they are not fully sane, but there are normal, common, what we call theory of mind issues that always arise whenever you are gathering requirements. Customers generally can't explain their requirements to you very well. The reason is because, most usually, is because they know the process so well and have been using it for so long, and it's part of their daily lives, that when they try to explain how the process works to you, they simply don't know what you don't know. There is an assumption of knowledge switch that clicks over into everyone's mind where they simply don't explain things to you that you don't know because it never occurs to them that you don't know these things. They assume that, hey, you're a developer, you're a professional, you know how this works, you're the pro at this. So I'll just give you a couple of bullet points and you'll know what to do. And there is this assumption of knowledge problem that doesn't exist. And as a developer, what you would like is for your customer to explain their process to you as if you were a small, dull child or a golden retriever. They won't do that because they're going to have an assumption of competency that you probably don't deserve, not because you're not smart and capable, but because you don't know the process. Your problem as a developer is, of course, you don't know what you don't know. And the problem with the customer is they assume you know things that they know, and they don't know the things they know that you don't know. It gets real complicated. So thus, in the design stage, you run into this communication problem of assumed knowledge. Again, it's a theory of mind problem where they just don't know what it is that you don't know. So what you'll get is something like this that says, okay, well, this is our application. This is how we want it to work. And as soon as I see this, I have questions that I'm going to need to ask that customer about how this thing works. And I am going to probably have to ask these questions continuously and iteratively so that they can explain the details. And every time I ask them a question, I need a written response. And I need to document that into a general application requirements document. And I need to share that document with the customer. Basically, this application requirements document that we just started off with, that is very, very, how shall I put it, scarce as far as details go, this is going to have to be built out. And this is going to have to become much longer. And as we build it out and as we make it longer, we're going to have to share this with our customer at every step along the way. So I'm going to see this and I'm going to have questions. So what I need to do is come up with some written method of getting questions back and forth from the customers and incorporating that into my requirements document. So just on the initial look at the requirements that we've been given here, just looking at question one or step one, I begin to have questions that need to be answered as far as how this application is going to work. I need to draw these details out of them. And so it doesn't matter if you think your questions are dumb, don't be embarrassed by asking even simple questions, because we have a single goal at this stage of the development process. And that single goal is to develop a shared understanding with our customer about what they want the application to do and precisely how they want it to work. So just to give you an example, if we look at the requirements themselves, look at step one. Students asked to declare or change their major by notifying their faculty advisor. Okay, I don't know what that means. And so I got to ask some questions. So when I look at step one or two, so again, let's look at step two. Faculty advisor approves or disapproves after consulting with the student. All right. So do those things happen sequentially? Is that a loop? Is that iterative? Is there some back and forth between the advisor and the student, or is this just a single step? It happens once and then we move on. Number two, how do I know who the student's advisor is? Is the student going to pick their advisor off of a user picker on the form? Am I going to look up the student in some sort of external database and simply return who their faculty advisor is and make a task assignment by grabbing them out of the database? How do I make that connection that is specified here in item number one between the student and their faculty advisor? How does that linkage occur? I could think of a couple of different ways that I might do that. I've just given you two. We need to know about that. Now, in this case, the answer is the student chooses. So my requirements Q&A document becomes a little bit longer. My first step is actually, now I've got to figure out how the form works. I've got to put in the details about what step one is. The student will open up a request form. The student will select their faculty advisor from the request form, and the student will then submit the request form. The request form will be transmitted to the faculty advisor whom the student selected. The advisor will review the request. They will ask questions of the student, perhaps not. They may just approve it or what have you, but they may have questions that they want to ask the student. So therefore, I must have an iterative loop so that the faculty advisor can ask a question. That question would be sent back to the student. The student provides an answer, which would then go back to the faculty advisor. That process may continue through 4 or 5 questions, 10 questions, I don't know. And once the faculty advisor is satisfied, then and only then will the faculty advisor determine whether to approve or deny the request. So that after consulting with student phrase, I can't find my mouse. There we go. That consulting with student phrase, that hides a multitude of evils that we need to work out in our requirements document. And the only way that we can work that out is by asking those questions about how that will work. And of course, there are other questions that show up. For example, down here at the bottom, it doesn't say, it says once a student has more than 150 hours. Well, this says department re-up. I think that means department rep. I don't know when I did that. So if department approval is required, a department rep must approve. The dean's office must approve. The registrar will assign. Okay, let's step back here. A department rep? And who might that be? Is it one person? Is it two or three possible people? How is that task going to be assigned to the department rep? A, who is the department rep? Is there more than one? B, is there more than one department rep? C, if there is more than one department rep, do I assign the task to the first user to accept, or do I assign it to all of them? And whenever any user completes, it completes the task, but they're all assigned. I need to know who these people are, who department rep is, singularly or collectively, and how they're going to handle that task. Same thing here. The dean's office. The dean's office is a room. Rooms can't approve anything. I need to know who my approvers are. And if I, so who are the approvers for each step? So we'll provide a list of department approvers. The registrar's office may be Diana Stewart. Boy, I just can't type. Diana Stewart, Barb Stanley, or Rick Robb. Dean's office is Eric Winnemute. Okay, great. How do we choose whether to assign Diana, Rick, or Barb? So we're now talking about the registrar's office, Diana, Rick, or Barb. How do we choose? All right, well, we're going to let them accept the task. We're going to provide the options to the user. Or the customer, they're going to come back and say, this is how we would like that task to work. Will the student and the new faculty advisor need to interact as part of this process? Because down here at the very bottom, we've got the new faculty advisor is notified of the new student assignment. Is that it? Is it just a notification? Okay, if so, then it's just a notification, but I need to know that because I need to know if anything else will happen. So I'm going to have a lot of questions that I'm going to need answers to. And so having a Q&A matrix like this that I can take, I'm going to append it to my requirements document, number one. And number two, the answers that I receive in the answers column are then going to get appended somewhere here in this application requirements section as I begin to build out individually what every single activity that's going to occur, who's going to do it. That all needs to be specified in the requirements document. It may not necessarily need to be supplied specifically in Word document format like this. There are some other documents that we have that we'll talk about in a few minutes that also encapsulate this, but I'm going to need to build these application requirements out. Again, my whole purpose in doing this is to build a shared understanding with my customer so that we are both on the same page. Both I and the customer know precisely what it is we're building, and it's on paper. It's documented. Everyone sees it. Everyone approves it, and everyone agrees that this is the application we are going to be building. You do not want to get into any sort of conflict with your customer, your initial customer, over whether you are building the thing they want you to build. If you have a document that everybody has agreed to, that everybody has gotten their feedback into, that everyone understands, you're going to have a much easier time, and you're going to avoid a lot of potential conflict with the customer over misunderstandings. Our goal here is to avoid any misunderstanding about what it is that we're building so that everybody is on the same stage. We've already looked at that requirement demo. We've talked about documenting all the answers. It looks like I've gotten ahead of where I should be here. Something to point out, though, that whenever you're going through this question and answer process and you're filling out your documentation, sometimes the answers you get from the customers, as in that indication of who's in the registrar's office. Well, Diana, Barb, and Rick. Okay, great. That's now I have 3 people who might possibly be assigned a task. That's going to raise more questions because I need to know how they're going to be assigned that task. And again, this goes back to some of the other questions that I ask. The important thing to remember is every time you ask a question, be prepared for the answer to prompt many, many more questions. As part of building the application requirements, you are going to start collecting some data. You're going to need some data about the form. Ultimately, you're going to need some data about the process and what have you. That all needs to be documented as well. Now, you're going to want to append some other documents to the requirements document. They're just going to be part of the requirements document. Again, they need to be looked at and approved so that everybody says that they understand what it is that you're going to be doing. Keep in mind that what I'm about to show you will many times make no sense to your customer. So it may require some, explanation on your part as to what you're doing here. But one of the things that we ask for, and one of the things that you should ask for, but one of the things we ask for at BP Logics, and one of the things that you should ask for from your customers, or at least build for your customers, is some sort of list of the data that you're going to collect. So for that data, I suggest, and this is what we use here, at least it's similar to this. It's not exactly this, but we have a similar spreadsheet that we cover with our customers about the form and the process timeline and how it's going to work. So in this particular case, we're looking at the form itself and how the form is going to be built. So we have some things that we need to know. First of all, what is the data that we are collecting on that form? So far, we've talked about the process. I want the student to submit this, and the faculty advisor looks at it, and then it goes to the registrar's office, and the major gets changed, and he gets a new faculty advisor. Yay. That's the process. Okay, what is going to make this process work? What information do we need to use for making this process work acceptably? So we need to know what the form is going to have on it. So we have a list of form controls here. The form control name basically allows us to know the data that we are collecting, because field names should be logical. They should be related to the data that is being collected in that field. They should be understandable. You shouldn't use weird naming requirements whenever you're developing something, because if you do use weird naming requirements and you show that to the customer, and this field is this action desired field is not called action desired, but it's called TXT underscore or form or FRM underscore TXT underscore ACTDES. I don't know what that means. I just made it up off the top of my head using some weird sort of naming convention, and it's dumb and I don't like it, and my customer doesn't like it. I'm sorry. I didn't have the time off the top of my head to create something that even partially made sense for the field name. I guess it does. FRM for form underscore TXT for text. So it's a text field. So it's on a form. It's a form field. TXT. I know it's a text field or an input field. Underscore ACTDES. Act des. That's the action desired. Don't do that. It just complicates your life way more than you need to. If you have a field that's called action desired, simply name it action desired and give it a friendly name here. And that way everybody knows what that field is and has an idea about what it's going to do. Obviously, we need to know the control type that it is. In this case, that field happens to be a radio button. Okay, great. It's a radio button. That means it has options. What are those options? Are they fixed in stone as they are here? Or say here for the degree desired? Or am I pulling them from some database somewhere, like with the major change approval? Wait, that's a checkbox selected. I need a drop down. There we go. I have a drop down, a student name drop down. It's a type ahead. And so I can just sort of type in a name. I did that because for the sample, I don't have a database of students and I don't really have the students as part of my system. And which is another question I have to ask, by the way, but we'll talk about that later. So in this case, I have a drop down. So in this particular case, as I'm building my requirements, I learned that students aren't actually process directory users. Now, I've seen it run both ways at schools. So we do have schools that have like 20,000 users because they include all of their students as process directory users. And we have others that just have the faculty and the staff as process directory users and students aren't. Now, if my students are process directory users, well, I know who the student is when they open the form. And I don't need to identify them any further than their authentication takes them. I know who they are. So when they open up the form, I can just automatically drop their name in as the form submitter or the student who wants to change their major. That's easy. But what happens if my students aren't process directory users? Well, I got to get their names from somewhere, usually some external database. And I can't automatically assign the student because when the student opens up the form, they're not logged into Process Director. They're anonymous users. So they have to identify themselves. So there's a drop down, it's type ahead, so that the student can identify themselves. And in this case, the options are going to have to come from the external database that contains my list of students. So the student would simply start typing their name in. It'll get found in the type ahead. They'll select their own name, and then we're off to the races. Obviously, if this was a system where my students were part of Process Director, I wouldn't need this field, or, well, I'd certainly need the field, but I would auto-fill this field. It would be a user picker field, and it would be auto-filled from Process Director based on who the current user was. I would just assign it to, form submit user. But in this case, if we go back up to the very top to our action desired, in this case, it's a option control, and I want to specify the options. The options will be fixed. And so, by the way, if I know I'm going to have these fixed options, how am I going to provide them? Am I going to put them in a drop-down object? If so, I need to document that I'll need a drop-down object that contains these 4 options. That would be the best way of doing it. There are other ways, but the drop-down option is best. So now I know I have another object that I might need. I need that drop-down object there. I've got this list of degrees. In this case, I have it shown as a radio button list where I have these 4 degrees there. Presumably, most places I don't need that because I know what degrees I confer, and it's probably a rather longer list than that. And so therefore, I'll just pull that from a database. But we have to discuss all of these things. We have to know if there are any visibility conditions or any specific enabling conditions. What fields are required on our form? We need to document all of that so we know what our controls are. We have some idea about what data we're saving. We know what data type the controls are. We know what options for those controls like radio buttons or drop downs or list boxes that contain a list of options. We know what those are. We have to document all of this information about the form as we begin figuring out what our application looks like. You may notice at the bottom of this, there are some other tabs before I move it back out of the screen. Process mapping, notifications, application objects. We'll get to that here in just a few minutes. But as far as the form goes, we have that spreadsheet that gives us our very first knowledge about what the application is going to look like, because we can begin constructing the form. At the same time as we construct the form, we're probably going to have to also take a close look at the process. Forms and process timelines operate interdependently. It is often not possible to completely configure a process timeline until the form is configured, and vice versa, because the interoperability between forms and process timelines is so high. But just as we've done with the forms and gotten into the details of what the form fields look like, we also need to get into the details of what the process looks like. So again, we need to know what the steps of the process are. We need to know what the duration of each step is, the participants, the results that are possible for that step, dependencies or constraints that exist, and of course, any notes that we might have. And even though I just pulled it off the screen, we'll have to drag it back onto the screen. I have a similar thing happening here with an Excel spreadsheet for my process, which again, I'll expand a little bit so that we can see it. So here are all of my activities that are going to be part of the process timeline. These are all the things that have to happen. I have their durations specified. So each one is going to take a couple of days, perhaps. I know who the participants are and how those participants will be assigned. So, for example, the department approval activity. It's dynamically assigned from a business value. The faculty advisor approval, that is designed, as we spoke about earlier, by picking the faculty advisor from a user picker on the form. On the other hand, I know exactly who in the dean's office is going to be the approver. As we saw in our question, the answer to that was Eric Wintemute. So Eric is going to be the assignee there. And for the registrar, again, we're back to Barb, Diana, and Rick. We have to figure out how they're going to do that. We've gotten our answer. We will include that in this spreadsheet to show how those users will be assigned. And down here, of course, the new faculty advisor selected from a form field, obviously another user picker. I've got the results for each of my activities, the dependencies, what activity must complete before they begin. Now, this one is pretty simple, except for these two activities right here, the department approval and the dean's office approval. Both of them are dependent on the faculty advisor approval. Okay, good to know. That means that both of these activities are going to run in parallel with each other as soon as the faculty advisor approves. So this entire process, these two steps combined, it's 5 days of choice, but in actuality, since they are running in parallel, I can expect both of these activities to be completed within 3 days because the registrar changes activity the department approval activity should complete the day before the dean's office approval activity does. So the dean's office approval is my long pole in that particular tent. Then we get to registrar changes. Obviously, that can't start until both my department approval and dean's office approval complete. So this has two dependencies, and obviously once the registrar has made the change, we'll assign our new faculty advisor. We have some needed when steps. Well, as it turns out, I don't actually need dean's office approval unless the student has more than 150 semester hours. Unless you're planning on staying in college until you're 35, if you have 150 semester hours, probably best not to change your major at that point. You're almost done. And so if you're at 150 semester hours and you've decided, I want to be an economist, and then 150 hours into that, you're like, I don't like economics all that much. You know what I really want to be? An astronomer. Well, okay. Now you've just added another 3 years of college to your degree plan. We're probably going to want to have somebody look that over. So we have needed wins on some of these activities. And of course, we have some notes. For example, this faculty advisor approval, we're going to loop there between faculty advisor and student submission, or in this case, student resubmission, because we have to, remember, loop back and forth between the faculty advisor and the student for any questions they might have. So the faculty advisor might ask for resubmission several times. I'm not even sure that even resubmission, now that I think about it, is a great name for it. Maybe rather than resubmission, it should be student answers or student responses or something like that, because there's really only one initial submission here. So maybe that's not a great name. But now that I have it down on paper and I can look at it, hey, great. It occurs to me it's not a great name, and I might want to change it at that point. Notifications, another one. I need to know the notification type, who the notifications are sent to, and when they're sent. Again, I have a spreadsheet for that. Let's take one last look at that and look at that spreadsheet one more time, and we'll just cover it because I have a couple of different things here, and one of which we'll cover a bit later, but we'll look at it now, and then we can just get the spreadsheet out of the way. My notifications. I'm sending basically 3 different notifications in this process. These are the notifications. This is when they're going to get sent, and this is to whom they are going to be sent when they go out. I've also got this other one here called application objects, which allows me to just list every application object I'm going to need. So in this case, I have a form, a process timeline. I've got obviously email templates are forms as well. I've got a knowledge view, a data source, 3 business values, a business rule, and I haven't added them on here, but I may need a couple of drop-down objects as well. I need to know the number of objects that I'm going to have to create inside the Process Director system. So this spreadsheet is very useful. And again, this spreadsheet gets incorporated into the requirements document. It's all part of it so that everybody can see what's going on. Now, it's often helpful whenever you are working with a customer to create them a process map. All right, so what kind of process map do I want to create them? That's an interesting question. If we look at Process Director and we go into, I know I have it in here, but I don't know what I've done with it. Let me just type in major. There we go. Process Director training process. Change of student major. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Boy, being able to search the content list really does make your life a lot easier. I got to tell you. All right, so this is what I'm going to see in Process Director. Look, this is fine. I know what this is. I know what it means. I know that I can double click on something here and it's going to pop open my properties and I can go through all of these properties. That's great. Another great thing about the Gantt chart is it gives me the time bars, right? I know approximately when all of my activities are going to start and are going to end. And that's fine as far as it goes. From our point of view as Process Director developers, that's perfectly acceptable to us. Customer who doesn't know Process Director is going to look at this and just go, what? What does that tell me? Well, other than telling you the times when we expect things to start and end and how long they're going to take, probably doesn't tell you much. Going to need something else. And generally, even though this has its own drawbacks as well, generally, I'm probably going to provide a flow chart of some sort that specifies how my process is going to work. And let's see, how do I zoom in here? Because now we're looking at it in Adobe. There we go. So we'll make this big enough so that I think you can read it on your screens. So here are my initial requirements. And what I've done is I've built a flow chart that kind of outlines how the process will work. The flow chart is, of course, more complicated than a process timeline. There's a lot more explanatory text on here about when stuff is going to happen, what decisions need to be made. There are a lot of arrows running this way and that because the process, even though it only has like, 6 steps, still fairly complex. The way that we need to handle it, the fact that there are these dependencies built in, the fact that there are needed when conditions that are built into this process, it's a little bit harder to map. Now, of course, the drawback of a flow chart like this is that while I can add that level of complexity, and I think if I read this and I follow all of the arrows properly, I can get a pretty good idea of what the process does. Unlike a process timeline, what this doesn't tell me is how long all this is going to take. So the drawback to the process timeline is that it hides a fair amount of complexity from the graphical representation. The drawback to the traditional flowchart is that it hides any sort of relationship to the amount of time that the process is going to take. So we use a Gantt chart, but it's often best to present a flow chart because more people understand flow charts than Gantt charts. And if you don't really understand charts at all, a flow chart, especially if you have appropriate explanatory text, is going to be easier to understand probably than the Gantt chart that we see in the process timeline. In any event, we're going to assume that if customers find the flow chart easier to understand, that's what we should provide them. Either way, the user needs some sort of process diagram that they can understand so that they can see how the process and understand how the process works and that they can confirm to you that the process works correctly. Now, remember a few minutes ago when I was talking about theory of mind and about how the customer doesn't know what you don't know, and the customer assumes you have knowledge that you don't have simply because they're so familiar with the process, it never occurs to them that there are these little wrinkles that nobody who doesn't work with the process every day understands. Well, that flows both ways, my friend, because you know how Process Director works, and you need to be able to explain to them as if they were a small adult child or golden retriever, how Process Director works. You're not doing it because you think they're dumb. You're doing it because you don't know what they don't know. And sometimes you have to be obvious. Occasionally here in training, I find that I repeat myself irritatingly to try to make a point. But again, it's to try to get something across so that I don't miss some weird detail, especially at this point because of my familiarity with the product. I try to explain it simply and often repetitiously because it works. And it wouldn't work for me because I would be bored and I would say, I know all this, but people who don't know all of this need that sort of repetition. And so you need to be sure that whatever it is that you're showing to the customer, you have enough explanatory text on there so that they understand what is going on. You have to assume that you don't know what they don't know either. So you have to make it explicit for the customer because, again, goes back to that shared understanding. We all need to have that same shared understanding of how this thing is going to work and what it's supposed to do, and ultimately what it's going to look like as well, because we haven't even gotten to that part of the design stage. But give them a nice simple diagram that's easy to understand, but that at the same time gives them all of the information they need to say, yes, this is how I want my process to work. We've already talked about I've already showed you the application objects in the Excel spreadsheet. So you just need to list all of those objects that you're going to need to build the process. Again, showed you that in the sample process. So the question then becomes, why are we doing all of this? Why can't I just take their application or their initial requirements request? Why can't I just start building stuff? Because it's the building stuff that I want to do. And for, people who like building things, people with sort of an engineering bent in their mentality, they kind of just like to get right to building things. But even though this is a super simple application from my perspective, it's still relatively complex. It has some complexities built into it. Even simple applications have their own weird little complexities. Also, I need to know how many form fields there are, and what type of form fields, how many forms there are, how many business rules, process timeline, how many activities, what type of activities. At some point, I got to tell the customer what the scope of the work is going to be. Now, of course, most of the time internally, the cost is not an option. The customer is more concerned about a due date. When can you get this done? But that's not universally true. There are some organizations who actually do internal accounting on this. Yours might be one of them, where the time that is spent on building this application has to be paid for by the requester's organization. In that case, they want to know more than just about the time it's going to take you to build. They want to know the cost, because they're going to get charged an internal cost for every hour that you spent working on this project. That has a direct effect on their department budget. They're going to want to be pretty stingy with that money, by the way, and you need to be stingy with that money to the extent that you can for them, because you don't want to waste their money, because it's coming right out of their budget, and money that they pay you is money that they can't pay other portions of the organization for their services. So if you do that sort of internal accounting, this becomes even more important, because we not only need to know time, we need to know cost because of the budgetary implications it has. If you do your specifications right, at the end of it, you'll know how all the pieces, you'll know what pieces there are, and you'll know how all of those pieces fit together. Not only will you know, but the customer will know how all of those things fit together. Again, you and the customer need to have shared expectation on level of effort, time, cost, results. You all need to agree on the details of how the application will be implemented, how it will work, something I haven't even talked about, and I don't even think I have in this slide deck, is design. Now, it may be that you have an organization that just has some template that's already built, that all your forms follow this template. Okay, great. Then that's fine. We'll just use that template. What if it's an external application? Do you have the same sort of requirements there? Design, font usage and size and imagery and anything else that you want to put on that form. I mean, that's all part of the specifications as well. We don't talk about it here because we're kind of concentrating on sort of the technical process of building the application. But we do need to think about the design implications as well. Everybody has to agree on all of that stuff. Sometimes you may even have to have mock-ups of the form saying this is what the form will look like to the end user, so that the customer agrees on that. And of course, you all want to ensure that you have the same goals before you start developing. All of this stuff should be done and completed, and you should have agreement, sign off, approval of time and costs and all of that before you begin working inside Process Director to actually build this thing. Sure, this is a lot of stuff to do at first. I mean, it may take, with the back and forth and with everybody being busy and having multiple commitments, I mean, it may take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of back and forth at various times to finally come up with a requirements document that everybody agrees with. And by the way, I don't want to scare you off with this requirements document. It doesn't have to be 50 pages long or 100 or 150. It just needs to be long enough for everybody to understand what the project is and no longer. You don't have to pad the thing, but you do have to ensure that you have all of the basics and that everybody agrees on the basics. Sure, it seems like a lot of work up front. You got to go through all these hoops and pass these documents back and forth and ask these questions and whatnot. Sure, it's tedious. You know what's really tedious? Building an application, having the customer look at it and say, I hate it, and then having to go back to scratch and build it again. Because that's a lot of wasted effort. We want to avoid that. By the time we start building stuff, we all need to want to agree on what that stuff is. I'll be honest with you, this is not going to fix all problems. Many years ago, I guess back around 1998 or 1999, I had a job to build a website for a customer. And I went through the entire process that I described here. And I even gave them a mock-up. By the way, this has happened twice now that I think about it. This has happened, but this one was a particularly egregious one because I built it. And then once I built it, I actually made a mock-up of it in PowerPoint. And I gave her the mock-up in PowerPoint so that the customer could look at it. And she said, okay, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what I want. Okay. And so I built that website to look exactly like she said she wanted it. And she opened the website up, and her initial response to me was, I know this is what I asked for, but I hate it. So this is not a guarantee that going through this process is going to fix every problem. And it's not going to guarantee that when the customer sees the end result, even though they said that this is the end result they wanted, it may not be the end result that they actually want. However, in most cases, again, I can think of 2 times since the 90s that this has happened to me. All the other times, everything else went pretty much as expected because everybody knew what they were getting into before we got into it. And it's way less work to do that than at the end to be told, this is exactly what I asked for and I hate it. Do it from scratch, and to have to restart the whole process again. That may be unavoidable. But if you just go cowboying your way through building stuff without the customer understanding what it is you're building, the chances of them looking at it and saying, what are you doing? This is not what I want, are much higher. And you're going to have to repeat work way more than you want to. That brings us into the development stage. So from here on in, it gets a lot more straightforward and a lot simpler. You need to design the application folders. What is the structure of my application? How is it going to look? Well, now, as I've said many, many, many times in this webinar, what you want, come on, navigate for me. What you want is a application-based folder structure. This application exists in a parent folder called Process Director Training Project. Inside that folder are all of my forms, my process timelines, support objects like a dashboard. There's a knowledge view for the dashboard there. All of my data objects exist in this folder. Everything I need to make this application work exists in this folder. This is going to make my life a lot easier having this folder and subfolder structure, especially when it comes time to exporting this application from one system to another. Our recommendation for many years, and one, by the way, I note that some of our customers refuse to follow, is that you use this method of application organization. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen customers who just said, okay, we're going to put all of our forms in this folder and all of our timelines in this folder. And I understand why you would think that might be an easily understandable method of organization. And indeed, it is easily understandable. That there's no denying that. But it is a method of organization that makes your life a lot harder. And if you're like me and you're lazy, you want to make your life as easy as possible. And the easiest way of doing that is this level of organization. Now, there is an exception to this level or this type of organization. And that is, we have to figure out if there are any global objects in this application. And if there are, well, we've got to account for those. So again, if we go back and look here, technically, I have something in this application I shouldn't have. And the reason is because I need this application to be exportable all as a single package. So it contains objects that you normally wouldn't have on your system. So something to think about when we go into the process data folder here. Well, if I can click on process data folder, I've got a data source in this folder, as well as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 business rules. And of course, here's the base data for it. It's an Excel spreadsheet that gets all of my sample data. In a normal application, none of these items would exist. These items are all global objects. Data sources, always global objects. I only need one data source that connects to a specific database. So I don't need 5 internal user data sources. I don't need 5 internal DB data sources in Process Director. I don't need 5 connections to my ERP system, although there's an exception to that as well. In general, though, I just need one data source per data connection. And I want to use that data source everywhere. So again, if we go back and look at our content list, I'm going to want that. Well, let's get rid of my, boy, in 6.1.200, I didn't realize how irritating this was, having to delete all of this text until I started working in 6.1.200, and we have the X button there that just automatically deletes the box. But we have our data sources folder right here. It's at the root level. This is where all of our data sources should be. I've got business values here. Business values are almost invariably, they're global objects. All of your business values should be here because business values virtualize data and they can be used anywhere in Process Director. Business values, like data sources, like custom tasks, are automatically global objects. And if you've got business sources like I do, seeded throughout your system, that's normally a super bad idea. It doesn't harm your implementers in that you pick business values from the choose system variable dropdown, and you organize that dropdown when they go to business values. You have the categories that you put in the property of the business value on the properties tab, sort by value. And that's great. It doesn't really harm what your end users do. As a system administrator, having business value salted throughout your installation is just a nightmare, because now you've got to go, every time you want to make a change to that business value, you've got to find out where it is on the system. Sure, the new content list makes that a lot easier, but that's a pain. So business values should go here as well. Again, I can't do that because when somebody says, can I see that application? It's got to work out of the box. So all the pieces have to be included. But a normal application would not have these pieces because these would all be global objects that exist on your system somewhere. So just keep that in mind. There are some differences in terms of what the application's folder structure will include. Now, business values, of course, should point out business values can be either global or they can be local, depending on how they're configured. And you'll just have to work that out based on what business values you create and how they're being used. Remember, all of our objects are interoperable, as I talked about earlier, so you're probably going to have to build some objects in tandem, like the form and the process timeline. Before you build the form and you put your controls on it, if some of these controls are drop-down controls, you'll need to build the drop-down objects first before you start building the form, or at the very least, you'll have to stop building the form, create the drop-down object, go back to the form. Development is always a little tricky, which, by the way, is why we've made all these Excel spreadsheets, so that we know what we're doing beforehand and we can prioritize the work so that we can do it most efficiently. So, when we look at the spreadsheet, if that spreadsheet says I'm going to need 3 drop-down objects, or I think in our case it was 2 drop-down objects, guess what you're going to have to build first to make your life easier as an application developer? Now you're going to have to build the drop-down objects first before you build the form. I always say I like to build the form first, and that is true unless that form has drop-downs on it, in which case I may have to build the drop-down objects first before I build the form. That documentation that we looked at by showing us what we're doing for our form, our process timeline, our email notifications, and our list of objects that we're going to need enables us to prioritize our work to get the development done faster, because it at least gives us some suggested order in how we should begin doing that development. So just something to keep in mind about how that works. So again, there's no wrong answer to what we build first. However, if I have that list of objects, to make my life simpler and to make the process more efficient, if I have any business rules and business values that have to be constructed, probably best if I constructed them first. Drop downs, which I don't have listed here, but that would be another object that would need to be constructed first. Then I can move to the form and the process timeline. The email template, I really don't want to build until after the form and process timeline have been built, because there's probably some things in the form or in the process timeline that is going to change up what my email template is going to look like and what it's going to do. So I really don't want to get into the business of configuring the email template until my form and process timeline is done. And then finally, the last thing I will build are knowledge views, because obviously the form and process timeline aren't done. I don't have form fields or other objects to pull into knowledge views. So that's generally how I would build it. Now, there is an exception, kind of to this, in that if you want to build all the objects at the same time, the most convenient way of doing that is using the template library. Because in the template library, I have, as we've talked about on another occasion or two, an application stub. It already contains my form. It contains a process timeline with a very basic approval loop already built into it. And it contains an email template. They're already hooked together. The design is already complete in terms of the look and feel of the form. The form fields that I want to gather for every form that I submit, submitter, submit date, and request number, they already exist on the form. They're already configured to be filled out automatically. All of this initial configuration that I would normally do on a form is already done for me. So the object could get created all at the same time, and that's fine, I suppose. It doesn't really, however, answer the question of what objects do I configure and in what order do I configure them. This is pretty much the general order in which you should configure stuff. So you would just build it from the bottom or the top. And so right here with business rules and values, I would probably add in right after that drop-down objects. We don't think about drop-down objects a lot, largely because we just grab stuff out of databases so often now. And so we build the business value to grab that data. But drop-down objects exist. They are useful. And for static lists, like the two that we have in this particular notional sample application, drop-down objects are probably our best bet. I know it seems tedious to throw in the drop-down objects like that, but you really, even though I did, we do have the other option of filling out the items property on the form. I don't like to talk about it too much because if you ever have to edit it, especially if you're using it in multiple places, I think it's really tedious because if you have it in 5 forms, you've got to edit it in 5 different forms. And if you have a drop-down object, editing it in the drop-down object always fixes the problem because that one edit fixes it everywhere. However, I will acknowledge at least one reality. And well, now that I've lost it again, I've got to find it. Do I still have it open down here? I do. Change of major request. So one of my forms here, and let's look at the advanced one because I think I still have it in the advanced one. And we'll go into our form design and we'll take a look at some of these radio buttons. And I'm just giving this to you as food for thought, as a decision to make whenever you're developing sort of any form as part of the process. And you'll note that this form has pretty extensive use here of these radio button lists. And you will note that over here in the items property for the radio button list, I've put the 4 items that will appear in that radio button list. Done it down here for this one too, for my 4 degrees. So you kind of have to think to yourself, and this is largely an aside, it's not part of what I was going to cover initially, but I'd like to talk about it simply to sort of clear it up. This is okay sometimes. We recommend that you fill from a drop-down or that you fill from a business value, any of these options. And so for any list control, radio button list, drop-down, list box, they all work the same. They're all list controls. The only difference really is the user interface that gets presented to the end user. They all have an items property. If I know I'm not going to use this anywhere else, it's only going to exist on this one form, is it worth adding the overhead of creating a separate drop-down object that's going to return these 4 items, which is going to add minimal, but nevertheless measurable overhead to the form, just to call a secondary object to present 4 text choices inside the form? Because if I wasn't using the radio button list control, if I was just using the radio buttons control, then I would have to have 4 radio buttons on this form. They would all belong to the same group. I would have to specify all of their values. And if I ever wanted to change it, I'd have to edit it anyway. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there's a wrong answer because I don't think that using a drop-down object to provide these 4 options is that huge of a deal or adds enough overhead to the form for you to care. On the other hand, if I'm only going to use this in one place and this is some sort of unique selection, why not just drop it onto the form in the items property? And if I ever have to edit it, I've probably got other edits I got to do on the same form anyway. So I'm going to have to go to the form to make the edit. So I can just edit it there. So this is occasionally a useful thing to be able to do. That's a decision that you have to make in terms of how you want that form to work. And obviously the decision that you make there will determine, as we've mentioned, the order in which you build things. Obviously, if it's a drop down, you're going to want to build that drop down. All right, so a couple of things to do. Best practices to think about anytime that you're doing some implementation. We've already covered one, which is the whole list controls thing and how we're going to fill that list. You're going to have to answer that on a case-by-case basis. Some other things you have to think about, however, that don't happen on a case-by-case basis, that are just generally best practices, are what do I do with attachments? Am I going to have document attachments? This particular process that we've been looking at doesn't. But if I do, I want to attach documents to the process. That is, by the way, the default option whenever you drop attach control or show attach control on a form. The default attach type property is always going to be process. In general, you always want to attach to the process because the form itself is also a process attachment. So if I attach both the form and any document attachments to the process, if I ever want to review any document or any form, I can open up the process timeline. All of my forms, all of my document attachments are already attachments to that timeline. I only have to go to one place to find those attachments or forms and open them. It's even more helpful if I have multiple forms that are used in a process, because all of the forms will also be attachments to the process timeline instance. So I can always open up the timeline instance and gain access to all of the forms and all of the documents that are associated with it. As I said earlier, use only one data source per database connection. No reason to, but I also said there was an exception. I never talked about that exception. There are cases where I don't want to give everybody access to everything in a data source. So I have several different data sources. Most of them are all internal user data sources. So let's say, now this is my global internal user data source. And so on this data source itself, well, I might not care what tables are get accessed. I might want to allow everybody to access every table from this data source. On the other hand, I might have a data source, again, looking at the internal user database, but I might decide, you know what? I only want people to see this table from this data source. So anytime I use this data source, I only have access to this one table. And so it may be that some developers do not have access to that global data source, while others have access to this data source. So there is an argument to be made that even though we should generally use one and only one data source per database connection, that for security or privacy reasons, again, HIPAA, FERPA, things like that, then you may need to have multiple data sources, some of which have different data segregated into different data sources. So that is an exception to the one data source per database connection. But beyond those specific security concerns, that is the best practice. When you are testing, and by testing, I mean the testing that you'll do as a developer as you're building stuff. When you're testing, use real users as assignees. Don't follow the example that I show you constantly here, where everything is assigned to timeline initiator, because I'm the only person that uses this system, and thus I'm the only timeline initiator, and everything just goes automatically to me. So I can demo it. Your system doesn't work like that. You have multiple users, and assigning stuff to you on a testing system doesn't necessarily reflect how that's going to work. Also, if you don't use the real users, then you're going to have to change all of the participants whenever you import it into production. And the last thing that you want to do on production is to make manual changes to a process on the production server. The only time anything should go on your production server is when you import it from staging. So you do want to use the real users. Now, on a test or staging server, We have things like you can assign it to a real user, but you can set a generic test email address so that you can monitor that email box for your notifications, and all notifications, irrespective of the users who are assigned, will always go to that test email address. So you can assign it to users. The other thing that allows you to do is impersonate the user so that you can go into the system and see the form and the process and how everything is going to work, knowledge views, whatever it may be, from the perspective that that user will see when they use your application. So you always want to ensure that you use real users and you fall back on impersonating those users rather than just assigning stuff to you and then figuring I'll change it later. Because you are going to have different permissions than those users have. What you see may not be the same as what the user sees. So setting up that impersonation is very important. With the caveat that on your staging system, your permissions are probably going to be different. And you do need to keep in mind that even if I'm impersonating a user, if I'm impersonating them on a staging system, my permissions may be much looser on that staging system. And I may see things while I'm impersonating that user that I won't be allowed to see on the production system whenever it gets imported. Because remember, like GUIDs, permissions don't import either. So using real users as assignees is useful and very helpful and very highly recommended. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all for everything that you might want to think about when you think about the differences between the configuration of a staging system and a production system, especially in terms of permissions. Use meaningful names. We've already talked about that for all of your object. We always recommend that you have the submitter, submission date, and request number on the form. How you determine what a request number is entirely up to you. I have several webinars where we've looked over how I do it and how I prefer to do it. So please refer to those webinars. Most specifically, the webinar on the creating an application stub or an application template. Some other things just in terms of design on a form, put action buttons above the routing slip, because having to scroll through a routing slip that has 50 activities on it just to hit approve is worse than being stabbed. So always ensure that the routing slip is on the form, but that it's always below the action buttons so that I don't have to scroll through the whole routing slip just to approve a task. Let me approve a task if I want to. And if I want to scroll through the routing slip, I can do that too. But don't force me to do one of those things, which is scroll through the routing slip. Use as few email templates as possible. Have the webinar that I do on email templates about multi-message email templates and using the same email template to send multiple messages through the use of embedded section controls. Technically, in most cases, you can have a single email template that is associated with the process timeline that you can use for every single notification that you need. It's not always true, but it's generally true, which is to say that well above 50% of the time, a single email template can perform all of the different notifications that you need for most processes. Use system variable controls instead of static text. Just makes your form look a little bit nicer than just typing static text system variables onto the form as form text. They'll both work the same way, but well, one is uglier. Use the default email template. I said use fewer email templates. This should probably be put up there with that one. Don't test or develop in the production environment. We've already talked about that. Developing and testing in the production environment is an extraordinarily bad idea. So don't do it, because the chances of you going into your production system and saying, I can edit this, it'll be fine. The chances of you destroying your production system by making changes to objects on the production system, while low, while extremely low, is never zero. So make changes on staging. Always import into production. Oh, also, when you're doing that, oh, I haven't gotten to that yet. When you're doing that, version everything. So every time I'm going to do an import of something, I've run into this in the last couple of days. Go to your application, and hopefully I can back my way to where I want to be. Well, I backed my way too far. Where was my change of major request? There it is, right there. So in my change of major request, one of the other reasons why we recommend the folder structure that we do is that I can go into my parent folder and I can go to its versions tab and I can create versions. That version, in this case of this parent folder, gives me a snapshot of the entire folder. Everything has been saved. So if I need to revert to a backup, I can. So if I'm going to import something new onto a system, or on a staging system, perhaps, if I'm going to make some edits to that, then prior to doing that, I want to create a version. I always want to be able to roll back to what I was doing before. Now, we actually have, and we don't have it here on this object, but if you were to look at a form object, at the very, very bottom, we have an import history tab, which tells me the last time it was imported. And if we scroll up a little further, we have a history tab. And that history tab gives me a somewhat reliable list of the changes that I've made. Sometimes the history tab doesn't work. And if you import it, it's going to overwrite this history tab. Versioning, I don't have to worry about that. Versioning gives me a snapshot that I can always roll back to. So while this history tab is convenient, especially if I'm in the middle of working on a form and making changes, and I make a change and I don't like it and say, okay, fine, this last change was bad. I'll just roll back to this change right here. You can certainly do that and everything will be fine. You do want a version. And versioning and this object history, that's not available for everything. It's available for forms, but it's not available for a folder. So you do want to do that versioning. So just something to keep in mind. Anytime you make a change, run a version before you make a change. That way you can always fall back if your change goes wonky. Just in recent days, I've run across a customer who had a change. They made their change. They didn't save a version of it. So they imported it onto a new server. So I've got no import history. I've got no, other than that initial import, I've got no version that I can look at to see what the difference was. I've got no save history because it's an entire application. So I can't even go back and see what was, I have no way of seeing what was changed. And if the question is, is this my fault or is this a process director issue? It's kind of hard for me to point to where the issue might be if I have no history, no way of knowing what the changes were, which, by the way, neither can you as a process director administrator. It's even more important for you to do this because you need to be able to fall back to where you were, or at the very least, be able to take an old version and a new version and compare them to see what changed and why they don't work anymore. If you don't do any versioning or anything like that, then you don't have the ability to do that, which is going to come back to bite you at one point or another when you go in and start making changes to objects. Finally, during the development stage, you're going to do your own testing as you build objects. Obviously, you're going to play around with it. You're going to test it as one of the users. You're going to impersonate them. you got to be sure all the basics are taken care of, right? That the correct data is going in the right places, that your visibility and enabling scenarios are working, that the process timeline is doing what you want it to do. The basic functionality you got to ensure is right before you close out the development stage. Once you're sure that that's true, we can move into the next stage, which is the testing stage. Now, for testing, does some useful things. It's going to help you find errors that you missed during your development testing, because you will make errors and you will miss things. And when you open it up in a testing environment and others use it, they're going to find the things that you missed, at least any of the more obvious ones, they're certainly going to find. And perhaps they'll find some of the less obvious ones, because users use the product in unique ways sometimes, and ways that you don't expect. Again, we get back to a theory of mind problem. You've built the app. You know how it's supposed to work. So you test it to ensure that if I use the app the way I think it's supposed to work, will the app work properly? And that's good as far as it goes. But the users, they do not know how the app is supposed to work. So they do not know this process that you have built up into your mind as the way the app is used. They don't know any of that. They are just going to come through there and cowboy their way through your application, and they're going to do whatever it is that they want to do, and they are going to find whatever it is that they find whenever they use your application. The other thing the testing stage does is it tells you how much users are going to like using the thing. Doesn't matter at this point now. We're not as concerned about whether the customer likes it. We've done the development. The customer has signed off on the development now. Now it's time to move into the testing stage. We like it. We understand what it does, as does our initial customer. Now we're exposing it to the second group of customers, which are the actual end users. They may hate it because it is inconvenient to use. B, may not incorporate the things that they actually need. Because oftentimes, not always, but, and probably not even a majority of time, but a substantial minority percentage of time, the people who are asking you to build the app are the people who don't use the app. And they don't know how the people who use the app, and have not asked how the people who would use the app would want to use it. And so they may ask you to do things that the users either don't want or don't need. So back in the 1990s, I was building a BPM app for doing cost estimates for a Department of Defense agency. For those of you who don't know, I spent 10 years on active duty as a military policeman. When I got out, I went into radio for a while, and then I moved back into technology. Been a programmer since I was 16, moved back into technology, became a software developer. And I went to work for 15 years as a defense contractor. And out here in California, I worked for a defense agency, and I built their entire accounting system. And they used it for about 10, 12 years after I built it. So I built the accounting system that they used them. And this was not an appropriated agency, which is to say they didn't get appropriated money. The way that they raised money was by selling their services to other government agencies. So they did things like testing 81 millimeter mortar lots when they were sent out by the manufacturer. They'd have to go out to the test range in Nevada and do lot acceptance testing, fire them off, see whether the mortars worked well. They did a lot of vehicle evaluations and armored vehicle and boat evaluations and stuff for the Navy and the Marine Corps. And the way that they made their money was they sold their services to other government agencies. So as part of their accounting system, I built out this very complex, but very detailed and very cool system for doing cost estimates by week for every project. And a project, for these guys might last anywhere from 8 months to 5 years. And they could put in a weekly time and cost estimate for 5 years. And everybody thought when I was building it that this was going to be great. Right up until the time it got into the hands of the people who were supposed to be doing the cost estimates. And they said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to ballpark a rough figure of, $12 million over 4 years to do this project. And I'm going to give them a bottom line number. But the one thing I'm not going to do is sit down in front of this computer for 2.5 hours and write in weekly time estimates for this project for the next 5 years or 4 years. I am not filling out 208 weeks worth of data. I'm just going to say it's 3 million a year over 4 years. Ta-da! And I probably worked on that for probably 3 or 4 weeks straight. And it was dead the day that it was released. Why? Well, the managers thought it was a great idea. The people who actually built it just said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And so it never got used. I, of course, got paid for my development time. So other than the, crushing personal loss that I felt when they refused to use it, at least I got paid for my time. We're looking for 2 things in the testing. First of all, again, finding the errors that you missed in the dev testing. Find out if end users like it. And again, remember, end users are your customers as well. You've got a couple of different ways of setting up testing. You should use a relatively small number of users. They should be comfortable in being able to document what they find. Give them some training. Don't give them detailed training about how the application works. We don't want to color their expectations. Let them get into it. Let them figure it out themselves in terms of having some space to kind of experiment with things to see what they think will work better for them. You need to give them a decent overview of how it works in terms of training, but you don't want to get too detailed. Let them figure stuff out as they go, and of course, be available to answer any question that they have. How long should we test? Well, we got to think about 2 things. A, the users have to have enough time to test it adequately. B, you got to have enough time to make changes and roll them back out to the users so that they can see if your changes work. Collect feedback from the customers. So you're going to need time to, have that feedback, have the customer look at that feedback. Maybe the initial customer, the person who commissioned the app, is going to want you to make some changes in addition to, any changes that are directly requested from the users. And you have a choice of either running this in a single phase test or a multiple phase test. There's some pros and cons for either method. If you have a complex application, it may be best to do it in multiple phases. So you run the test for a specified length of time, collect feedback, go back, make updates, roll it back out, and then go through another test phase and do that iteratively. For a complex app, you may need to do that simply so that you can keep track of all the things that you might need to change. So we'll have, an A test, revision of the application, a B test, another revision. If the app is simple enough, you can often get away with just doing a single phase. People will, and this is one of the nice things about Process Director, because we can make changes sometimes really quickly and get them updated for our customer-facing apps anyway. You get feedback from the users, run back to your office, change the form, whatever, export it, re-import it into production, say, hey, I made the change you asked for, and the test just continues. So you're just constantly making, changes day by day, perhaps hour by hour, many different times, just changing the thing incrementally as feedback comes in. Either method works. The latter is best for simple applications rather than complex applications. But as it says here, either way, make changes on dev, then re-import. Do not make the changes on production. Be sure that your customer is aware of all the feedback that they get from the testing. Be sure that your customer agrees with the changes that need to be made. Look, not all feedback from your customers is going to be, or from the users is going to be useful. There may be business reasons why the application does what it does. There may be technical reasons why it does what it does. Some of the suggestions are just going to be silly. You don't know. You want to consider every suggestion, but at the end of the day, you and the customer need to decide which changes have value to the users and which changes don't, and whether there are business or technical reasons why a change, as much as users might want it, because remember, users are your customers too, but sometimes they can't have what they want because there are, constraints that prevent you from providing it to them. Once your testing is over, you've made all the revisions. Optimally, your first customer, the person who commissioned the app, is happy. Your second group of customers, your test subjects, they're all happy. Well, we now reach release stage. Our application is now in its final form. So we need to import it into production. If you have separate dev and staging servers, we recommend that you import from dev, because that's where your most recent changes are made. So what you're doing is you're importing from dev to stage for the testing, and then you go back and export from dev to production for the actual rollout. If you only have 2 servers, obviously it doesn't work that way. You're probably doing all of your work on stage, and so you'll just export from stage. That's perfectly fine. But if you have all 3 systems, all of your exports should be coming out of dev. You shouldn't go from dev to stage and then to prod. You hit dev to stage for test, then dev to prod for production. Remember, whenever you're importing, especially if it's a complex application, import order is important. You may not be able to just bring in the application itself, right? If the application if you've created new groups on dev for the application for task assignments, you've associated metadata with your forms and your documents. You've created new global content list objects like business values or perhaps business rules. Those all have to be imported before you import the application. And if you've created a new workspace for your application, that can't be imported until you've imported the application. So the import order that you use to bring objects into Process Director is important. Metadata first, users group second, global content list objects third, then the application fourth, and then any workspaces that are associated with the application. Bring it in the wrong order and things will not work as expected. That's just part and parcel of having a hierarchical system of data. Means you have to import it in a hierarchical manner. Again, once you import, version, immediately version the folder so that, as we talked about earlier, it versions all of the objects inside the folder, makes a complete snapshot. And again, as I said previously, every time I do a import, version, so that I always have a fallback on the versioning. Permissions shouldn't be a big problem. Your server should already implement a permissions methodology. Permissions, when they're imported into a folder, will inherit the permissions that are applied on the parent folder into which it is imported. So your permissions should just automatically be inherited. However, there are times when you may need to set some special permissions. And of course, if you have workspaces and you bring in those new workspaces, those workspaces will need some configuration, because when you bring them over from another system, it doesn't bring over any of the group or user memberships of that workspace. So those workspaces will also need to be edited. Not so much, it's not a permissions thing, it's just a configuration thing where you have to add the appropriate groups and users to the workspace when you import them. And again, if you're going to be looking at what users do, impersonate those users real quickly, just to ensure they can open the forms, they can see their knowledge views and what have you. Once the import and configuration on production system is done, you are done. You can now, congratulations, start from scratch with the first revision of the application, because little caveat, sometimes once it's in production, you're going to find additional issues that are going to have to be fixed. And you're going to have to go back in and go through a change management process to fix those issues. No matter how good your testing is, no matter how good a developer you are, once you get into production and you go from a universe of 10 users to 1,000 or 10,000 users, believe me, they're going to find something wrong, even though you didn't. So with that, we are done with today's training webinar. We managed to make it all the way through. It is noon, which means I've used up your full 2 hours. So have a great week. I'll shut up. We'll talk to you next week. So long.